Don't forget, type in your question, and without further delay, I'll ask Adrien Treccani to take the lead to share his screen so we can begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to start with the first presentation at this great event. The objective for this 10 minutes is to cover some of the main topics in crypto custody. What are the latest trends? What are the main challenges and how we've got there? All the progress we've made in the last 10 years. I would like to start with a very quick review over the last 12 years. Bitcoin was originally invented and created to entirely bypass any trusted custodian like a bank. In 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto introduces Bitcoin, and you can essentially use Bitcoin from your mobile phone, from a USB stick, or directly on an application on your computer. Many things have happened since then, through Bitcoin being used for criminal activities, but then being much more legitimate, to then other cryptocurrencies popping up. And we have, I think, after a few bubbles and corrections, reached a point where we've reached this plateau where institutions are actually getting in and finding now important business cases where they can act as custodians, as tokenizers, essentially take a first-class role in this economy. And the main challenge that we've observed in the last 5 years, I would say, with these companies offering services is that it re-centralizes the risk. Such companies have to manage keys, they have to essentially be liable for the assets of their clients. And we've tried everything we could in this ecosystem to minimize the trust that we needed to have in these intermediaries or third parties. And as you know, the main trust that you need to have when dealing with such a company is around the way a custodian manages its keys. As soon as we speak about cryptocurrencies or tokens or digital assets in general, everything is secured with the notion of secret key. The secret key is like a long password, and this password is the unique access to your cryptocurrencies and your digital assets. So if lost or stolen, so are the assets, and it's critical that it is therefore maintained with high level of confidentiality, but also that it is properly backed up. As you can see here, there have been a lot of examples of both individuals and companies losing their keys, or at least losing some of their assets. It is estimated that 28% of all Bitcoins have been lost or stolen to some degree. And this is only speaking about Bitcoin. If you start speaking about other cryptocurrencies or DeFi or altcoins, the number would be very high too. This has not really improved in the last few years. Some of the largest exchanges have been subject to technical issues, to hacks, or to frauds, internal frauds being one of the important points. And therefore, we see more and more demand coming from regulated and trusted banks to offer high quality custody services. One of the first questions that you may ask yourself when you invested in cryptocurrencies for the first time was, where do I put my key? And the first sort of decision factor is typically to decide, well, am I going to store it on a connected device that we call a hot wallet, which could be on the hard drive of your computer, or which could be in a database in the case of a custodian, versus what is called an air-gapped or cold wallet, where the key is completely isolated from the network, and there is a high guarantee that the only way to access this key is to actually physically access the key store, which can be a piece of paper, which can be a box, which can be special hardware. Now, the current practice today on the market is for custodians to put as much as they can in cold storage. And typically exchanges would put 95+% of their assets under management in cold storage, and to still keep part of the assets in a hot storage. Reason being that obviously you have this trade-off between agility and security, and it is very hard to maintain agility and be able to transact at a high pace if you have your assets secured offline in a cold storage. Now, this is not enough, as you can imagine. The question is, first of all, where do you put these keys? Even if they are cold or hot, where do you put these keys? And in the last 20 years, if not more than that, the standard practice has been to rely on so-called hardware security modules. An HSM, or hardware security module, is a special piece of hardware that provides a high level of guarantee that the keys are confidential and they cannot be extracted out of the hardware without any kind of physical tampering to the box. In fact, some of these hardware modules even guarantee that with physical access to them, they still will not leak the key material that they've been configured with. HSM have been very well known in banking for many years, and this has been also the basis of most crypto custodian infrastructures. However, in the last couple of years, a field of cryptography, which also is known for quite a long time, but which is more recent in the context of digital assets, has appeared as being an interesting new alternative in managing keys. Multi-party computation, or MPC, is the idea that rather than trusting hardware, a more efficient way, again, this is debated, but a more efficient way could be to have the key split in multiple fragments, and each of these fragments independently would be useless, but together would be able to generate what is called a signature to authorize a transaction. The security principle here is that you don't trust this single point of failure that is the hardware. You don't have to trust a hardware manufacturer. Here you split the key and you assume that breaking these different keys fragments at the same time is extremely improbable. And we've seen multiple companies moving to MPC, and at least for the context of hot wallets, leveraging hardware-less, or let's say without special hardware infrastructure to maintain their keys. The advantage of MPC arguably is that you don't have dependency on these low-level hardware architectures. You can deploy this in the clouds, and you can decentralize the risk by having multiple parties, as its name indicates, maintaining the whole key and never re-centralizing the whole key in a single place. The disadvantage, I would argue, and of course it is yet again something that is debated, is there are multiple weak points sometimes in terms of rotating the keys, regenerating new keys, and in particular it is, because these key fragments are stored directly in the cloud generally or in a virtual machine, the security, the attack surface around each of these fragments may be much wider than what you generally have with special hardware. But at the same time, we see that even the largest companies on the market, whether it's Coinbase, have moved into providing some level of MPC technology for their hot wallets. So it's becoming more and more relevant. Now, whatever key store the custodian is leveraging, a key store, as its name suggests, is nothing more than a way to store the keys and potentially use them to sign a transaction that then is executed and broadcast on the chain. But the weak point quite often is not the key itself. If you think about an HSM, this hardware box, it is nothing more than a stupid signing box. Stupid in the sense that it exposes an API, it exposes an entry point, and you can use this entry point to ask the box to sign arbitrary things. And even if you're not able to extract the key, if this API is compromised, potentially the attacker can ask the box to sign any Bitcoin or Ether or a token transaction whatsoever. So the weak point of such a system quite often is not the key itself. If you do have a strong key store, whether it's an HSM or an MPC technology, the weak point quite often is around what governance layer you have put around your system. And if you think about the Quadriga hack that happened a couple of years ago, for those of you familiar, it is this Canadian exchange where the founder was the only person to know the passwords to the main wallets of the company. And allegedly, he died at some point, and therefore they could not recover the funds of the wallets because he was the only one to know the password and therefore to be able to use the funds. It was then demonstrated to some degree that he probably didn't die. He probably actually used the funds way before he announced his death, or his wife announced his death. And the intuition here is that he probably used the funds for himself to get richer himself way before, just because he was this single point of trust. And this really shows how important it is that the trust around the using the system itself is also distributed. There is no single point of trust. You have a strict protocol around who can do what. Typically for large transactions, it would involve more people in the company to authorize the transfer. And this is something that banks know very well, that they've been doing for many years, way before cryptocurrencies were institutionalized. What we see today is that these same frameworks that have been known by banks for a long time are now appearing for cryptocurrencies, and becoming best practices, and I would say required practices because of all of the risks we've seen in the last few years. Now, the main challenge we start seeing on the market is it's one thing to be able to store and occasionally process a transfer. But what was maybe 5 years ago an objective to store securely has moved very much into interacting with assets. We started, we just need to store Bitcoins and we don't want to lose them. But today, it's more than just storing Bitcoins. You want to be able to pay. You want to be able to move Libra. You want to be able to stake potentially. And the more use cases we start seeing appearing with distributed ledgers, in particular related to tokenization, staking, or decentralized finance, all of these new protocols, which for some of them are sources of potential revenues, you can generate a yield with staking, for instance, they require some dynamic interaction. They are not so easy to deal with if you only have a cold storage. So what we see more and more is a need for agility. And this agility, you don't get it with a cold storage. So I think a big topic today, and some of my colleagues are going to jump on this topic also, is going to be to pretty much give a solution to how we can maintain a high level of security as a custodian, as a bank, as a regulated company providing digital asset services, secure services which at the same time do not isolate the clients from all of these incredible opportunities which are popping up on the market today. And so I will conclude on this. METACO, we are a Swiss company based in Lausanne. We've been now for almost 5 years on the market, providing enterprise solutions for the management of digital assets. Most of the topics that are presented today are things that we know very well how to do. We have solutions for hot cold storage, for the strict governance layer, for hardware and MPC, and obviously with applications to tokenization, to DeFi, and to staking. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Adrien, for this presentation. There are no questions. I'll just remember the audience that they can always ask questions, but I have one for you. I wanted to know if you could tell us in 1 minute whether there were lots of standardization with regard to the custody of assets, and whether there were a lot of difference maybe that is made with regard to the asset that is actually in custodial.
I think the market is moving in multiple countries, and it's always hard to answer it with a generic response to that question because it is completely different in Germany than it is in Switzerland, that it is in Singapore, and obviously in the US. So I would say that yes, standards, best practices are appearing pretty much everywhere, but we also see that regulators and advisors sometimes are taking very hard decisions on what the best practice should be. If you think about Singapore or some countries in Southeast Asia in particular, they have imposed that most of the assets are in cold storage. And although I would argue that maybe there is some goods to it, it also puts the regulator in a position where the regulator takes a very hard decision on what is the right approach to deal with security. And I think that we've seen that in other fields, but it is still quite interesting to see how the market is moving, where best practices become potentially mandatory practices.
Thank you for this answer.